of a 30-day deadline for this war. Is that all that he had the stomach for? We're nearing that 30-day deadline. Is that why we're seeing this sort of stance coming in from the US president, that he is trying to now sort of taper it out because that's exactly in his mind what the deadline was for this war?
Well, it's again, your guess is as good as mine what he wants. But the fact is, which I can't understand, is that from day one, Iran has said that we will attack, US installations in GCC countries. From day one, they've said, that they will threaten shipping in Hormuz. So what was the big surprise about it? So that's why I don't know how they planned this war. So either some kind of objective has been reached in terms of totally reducing Iran's power in the region and giving the other countries like Saudi Arabia a larger boost, and of course Israel. I don't know. Let's see, because there's no doubt the devastation has been extreme. But like the gentleman just said, so has Israel suffered. So like I said, I don't see the point of this whole thing. One danger was that they did strike Dimona, which is the Israeli reactor, which is to the extreme end. That is a very, very dangerous thing. Dimona is not so easily hit because it's deep underground. It's got massive, massive shelters, but it did hit. So that's that kind of escalation the region cannot afford. It is a terrible thing to happen. But again, let's see if this pause becomes a permanent ceasefire. Hopefully it does, with everybody else also chipping in.
Was the hit on Diego Garcia also the reason why there were fears? It may have been a missed hit, but the fact that Iran has moved its capabilities from what it has previously acknowledged about the kind of radius it has for its missiles to have actually gone and hit something that was almost 4,000 kilometers away, that could have perhaps also raised the fears of where it could hit next?
Absolutely, yes. All of us track Iran's missile capabilities quite closely, but I never expected Diego Garcia to be hit. So that is something which Iran, we always knew, was not going to give in so easily. Not today, tomorrow, not day after, not in the next 5 years. That we knew about Iran. But this kind of military capability that it has shown is considerable. And hopefully also that threat of you had the very strange development of the US asking Iranian ships to supply oil. So hopefully it is that energy crisis which has finally called a halt to this insane war.
Absolutely. But this change in stance that we've seen, Arunima, from the US president in the last 24 hours, at one end, he has a 48-hour ultimatum. 24 hours later, he's backed down from that. If Iran agrees that there were talks and Iran agrees for the ceasefire for 5 days, what happens after 5 days? What's the guarantee that this does not become a full-blown war post those 5-day period?
Well, the onus will be on the United States of America and more importantly on Tel Aviv. Like our panelists have been pointing out, one doesn't really know if Washington has complete control over Tel Aviv, because twice it has happened where Tel Aviv has carried out attacks on Iranian infrastructure, which Donald Trump himself has come out and said that he did not Iran did, this kind of retaliation by Israel did not have the US's green signal. So one doesn't really know. We'll have to wait and see. There are two X factors still. One is the reaction from Iran. Sources within the Iranian establishments are indicating to their news agencies that there was no conversation with Donald Trump, there was no negotiations with the United States, and that US has backed off because Iran had threatened to carry out attacks against energy infrastructure in the entire Gulf region. That's exactly the position that Iranian embassy in Kabul has also taken. So first and foremost, the X factor of how Iran is going to react, because Donald Trump has offered a ceasefire for 5 days. Would that mean that the Iranian side will also respect that and hold their fire for the next 5 days? That's number one. Number two, we're also waiting for the official word from Tel Aviv, from Benjamin Netanyahu. Is he in agreement with this moratorium being offered by Donald Trump? What's his official position? That's also something that everyone is watching very closely. So cautious optimism is the sense I get from Gulf, from UAE.
Cautious optimism is one way to go for it, but they have to be prepared, Sanjay, isn't it? like I said, Iran has not even come out and acknowledged that there were talks at all. There is no ceasefire as far as Iran is concerned. So the Gulf nations, being the fact that they can't choose who their neighbor is and will be in a direct line of fire if Iran continues to do what they do, they can be cautious, yes. They can hope that what Donald Trump is saying is true, but they still have to be prepared to be at the receiving end of this.
Well, we are in a very uncertain phase at the moment. We certainly have heard what we have heard from Iranian media, but it's not likely that Trump was entirely hallucinating when he said that there have been conversations with the Iranians and that there has been an agreement. Trump is unreliable, but is he that unreliable? Could he have just made this up on his own? Not very likely. The question is who he has been talking to and whether this has been direct or through an intermediary, and there have been many possible and potential intermediaries we've been looking at. And if it is not responsible people like Pezeshkian or Arakchi who have been a part of this conversation, then this is all not likely to go very far at all. We do have to bear in mind that while Trump, of course, is on the back foot here, this war is unpopular within the US. He's been under great pressure to end it. Also, Iran is battered, heavily battered, and facing prospects even of worse. Therefore, clearly, both sides have an interest in bringing this to an end. Iran for its reason, the US for its reasons. Israel would be least on board. Israel would want to go all the way until the last missile launcher is taken out, until the entire enriched uranium that Iran has is seized. Those are not goals that are realistic. They never were likely to have been met. So Iran will retain its ballistic capacity. It will retain its enriched uranium. Therefore, Israel would then, if it were to end where it is now, Israel would be the one that comes off weakest through all this, and the US the weakest. And Iran, battered as it is, would have held on to its positions and held on to its claims that it will not give up on enriched uranium, it will not give up on ballistic missiles. So really, the weak one, who would have thought that Iran would be able to prevail against the combined military might of the US and Israel? But if this were to stop here, and it is an if, then certainly, battered as it is, Iran would have prevailed.
And not only prevailed, they've even set conditions in terms for how they would want this war to end. And those three conditions, Tarakarta, that Iran had put forth for the United States was, one of them was also that there are guarantees that no such future attacks take place on them. That's something that is a guarantee that no one would have ever given, Sanjay, isn't it?
Well, that's a guarantee no one can give. I mean, certainly Trump will not give that guarantee, and who is any president to give a guarantee for any president to come, for all time to come? In America, this kind of decision making is fluid, to put it politely, and it depends upon this advice or that consultation and this program and that program, and that can change all the time, as we've seen through the course of this war and through the course of all the wars really that the US has been engaged in since Vietnam or even the Bay of Pigs earlier. So this is not a guarantee that the US is in a position to give, and it's not a guarantee that that can be secured by the Arab nations from the US. Certainly they have put a great deal of pressure upon the US to call this off and to call a halt to it, because the prospects coming up over the next day or two really would have been catastrophic. The ultimate weapon of Iran has been the Strait of Hormuz. In fact, a passive weapon to just sit there and do nothing, launch the occasional drone, one a week would be enough, end of the passage, end of the oil business. Therefore, it is, the fact is that Iran has used the Strait of Hormuz as a weapon to have its say, and if this were to halt now, it would have prevailed, yes.
Well, Sanjay Suri, thank you very much for that update. Let's go straight across to Anas Alhaji, author and energy expert, perhaps one of the best in the world, and certainly the most insightful on the Gulf. Thank you, Mr. Alhaji. Thank you very much for speaking to me. I don't know if you've just heard the breaking news. Trump has hit the pause button. There's not going to be escalation, which would have meant that Iran's energy security would have been targeted by US and perhaps even Israel. Now, I want to ask you, is this pause real de-escalation or just a tactical breather before energy infrastructure becomes a target again? How do you see this, essentially?
It is a retreat from the statement yesterday of hitting Iran's infrastructure, not a retreat from anything else, and I will explain this. Yesterday in a group, basically, we had this discussion, and the problem is we expected that his advisors basically been telling him, look, your statement is against international law. This will put us in a lot of trouble, so we have to retreat, and this is one way to retreat. The statement basically of hitting the civilian infrastructure is literally against international law. Now, some people might agree or not agree that they don't care or care. This is not the issue. Even we've seen Israel, when they hit hospitals or others, they give the excuse before they hit it, and they say, well, there are militants in the hospital or others, to avoid that international law label. So it is a retreat from the statement. But if you look at what's going on the ground, this is a long war. This is not going to end the same way we are hearing about today. Here is why. Why the release of the strategic petroleum reserves of the largest in the world, the largest in history, that will last several months, and then the head of the IAEA comes in yesterday and said, we need more. We need more for what? After 400 million that will be released, and you need more? That means there is a long term here. The other issue, you look at the waivers they give Putin for his oil to sell it in Asia, and the waiver for the Iranian oil to be sold in Asia. If this is really a short war and it's going to end in a matter of days and there were negotiations, why do you need that? So the indications on the ground, this is a longer war than ending very soon.
So basically you're saying that Trump has been forced to retreat because of three things. Number one, failing to assume Iran's resilience. Number two, not anticipating that Iran would widen the conflict. And number three, not realizing that fundamentally this particular misadventure was going to bleed the global economy, even wreck the United States economy. That's what you're saying, fundamentally. And if
no,
so,
could
you explain?
I'm not, okay.
Yeah.
I am not saying that. Of course, probably that the way you understood my statement. All I'm saying basically is he tweeted that tweet about hitting the infrastructure, and it was expected that there would be a retreat from it, and now we've seen the retreat from it. But that does not end the war, does not end anything. At the same time, whether there was misunderstanding or misestimation of the Iran power, etc., we will leave that to the military experts. But there is one thing that is very clear. We have to distinguish between the benefits in the long run and the cost in the short run. So the cost to the United States in the short run is very high. We are going to end up with inflation. We might end up with a recession. Probably globally, we might end up with a stagflation where we have recession and higher prices at the same time. Of course, economists differ on this. But the idea here is no matter what, even if the war ends today, the benefits to the United States in the medium and long term are priceless in every sense.
So let me ask you, sir, what do you think compelled this retreat? What were the factors that made Trump recalibrate? Let's put it like that.
Well, the issue is the reputational issue, mostly about the U.S. hitting civilian infrastructure. We've seen many people, many Iranians, even those who support regime change, and some of the monarchists, basically, they call them monarchists, they support Pahlavi. They basically were questioning Trump yesterday. You can see them on social media asking the question, why you are hitting the civilian infrastructure? This is our infrastructure. So if we take over, we need the electricity. We need those power plants. Now, if we have a regime change, we are going to go to a devastated country with no power. So the questioning even came from the Iranian opposition.
So, Mr. Alhaji, let me ask you, supposing America would have carried out its threat of attacking Iranian energy infrastructure, Iran says the repercussions for Gulf infrastructure would have been worse, or they would have been as bad. And if that were to happen, what's the worst case scenario? If, let's say, after 5 days, there is no breakthrough, what happens? What's the worst case scenario?
Well, if the worst case scenario, basically, we have three worst case scenarios if you want to look at it. One of the worst case scenarios basically is hitting the desalination plants, the water desalination plants, because everyone in the area, including Iran, depends on them in the Gulf, which is a serious area, and that's a civilian infrastructure. That's number one. The second one is hitting any nuclear facility in the region, because that constitutes kind of probably a nuclear war. And the third one, of course, actions in Bab el-Mandeb in the Red Sea, because we might see the European insurance companies applying to the Red Sea what they did in the Gulf when they halted or stopped insuring ships and oil tankers, or literally kind of eliminated all the coverage. So that is another worst case scenario. So these are the three cases where things will get really worse, and that will literally devastate the world economy on several fronts.
So now let me ask you, because let's get into a few of the numbers. Does this pause stabilize markets? Because we've suddenly seen some markets respond and rebound. Or does uncertainty actually keep prices elevated? How will this play out?
It plays both sides, and we have to look at the net effect. Probably we have to wait a few hours until we see how the market will react to the net effect. Here's the net effect. Yes, pausing it basically is going to help kind of reduce the panic in the market. But 5 days, you are kind of making the war longer too. And that means less supplies are going to the rest of the world. So we have to look at the net effect here. The issue right now is panic. Panic, you need to literally eliminate panic to provide solutions to the Hormuz Strait. Notice the following. The Saudis done a marvelous job basically moving the oil from the east to the west. We've already seen over 22 tankers, the largest tankers in the world. Many of them are going to India and other places. Some of them already arrived in the last 2 days. So that is a mitigation effect, yet prices continue to go up. So we've seen the United States and the IEA releasing oil from the SPR. That's supposed to lower prices. They did not. Why? Because panic. And that panic came in from the fact that all those efforts, especially the release of the SPR, are telling people this is a long war. When the Trump administration a couple of days ago gave a waiver for the Iranian oil, they just told everyone this is a long war. So the waiver did not work, and prices are going up right now. So with the panic, as we discussed on the previous segment of the show a few days ago, the panic basically is causing several problems that are making the situation worse. One of them, the ships basically are being redirected from place to place, so we end up with more oil on water not reaching its destination. That applies to LNG and NGLs and everything else. And at the same time, we've seen hoarding, because for many traders, if you hoard today and prices will go up a week from now, you make money. And then we've seen companies like airlines, petrochemicals, refineries that operate only if that oil is available, hoarding that oil. Then we've seen countries, over 20 countries right now, are banning the export of petroleum products, literally. So we have massive losses. If you look at the jet fuel situation right now, half of the problem has nothing to do with the Hormuz Strait. Half of the problem has to do with countries far away from the Hormuz Strait, basically banning their exports of jet fuel. At the same time, we've seen refiners basically making more money selling the crude than refining it, because they bought it at $60 and now they are selling it at $100. So they make a lot of money just selling the crude. So we don't see the products in the market. So we have all those problems in the market because of panic. Any solution you are going to provide is not going to be a solution unless you stop that panic. And that panic has to stop in one way or the other. A true ceasefire will stop that panic. But we need to have that true ceasefire to see it. We are not going to see things out of just tweets and denial from the other side, and then whatever being said in those tweets changed after a few hours.
So, Mr. Alhaji, let me ask you, Russian oil is back on the market, or whatever there was already available is back on the market, which was loaded onto various crude ships and so on and so forth. There is, of course, oil sitting in the Strait of Hormuz. Certain countries are now being given access to that oil. Also, we are seeing the Saudis divert their oil from one coast to the other. Is it enough to cool all the fears and anxieties, or is this just a tip of the iceberg? Does it really not make much of a difference?
For the Russian oil and the Iranian oil, it's already in the market no matter what. So it doesn't matter. Okay. In fact, giving the waiver to both countries, again, they give the impression this war is going to be longer, so the impact is eliminated, the positive impact is eliminated. But there is something else that sounds like very funny, because Russian oil basically was sold at $45 and $50, and when you lift the sanctions on Russian oil, it went up to 95. So the same thing for the Iranian oil right now. So that's a problem. So the true effect in terms of mitigation is coming from two sources, basically. The pipelines of the Saudis, and to some extent the Emiratis, to some extent the Iranian pipeline too. And so that's the true effect. And that was, if you look at the Saudi move, basically it was the biggest and the fastest to the market. Then we have the releases from the SPR. The problem with the release of the strategic petroleum reserves is that most of the reserves basically are released in the West, while the shortages are in the East. And that is a problem. So it's not going to solve the problem immediately. The other related problem, by the way, when you talk about the numbers that we released about the waiver for the Iranian oil, the numbers are wrong. The administration told us 140 million. It's less than half of that. That's the actual number. And if you look at the details, basically, the details are really kind of very strange, because the details is Iran will not get a single penny if that oil is going to be sold to India or any other country.
So obvious question is,
so why sell it?
why sell it?
And other countries are afraid if they try to buy it and then take that money and freeze it in special escrow accounts, that Iran will classify them as enemy and then head their ships in the Gulf. So it is kind of like a meaningless approach.
A meaningless approach. Okay, so let me ask you, who's benefiting right now from this entire scenario?
The biggest benefits are to the United States in the short run, long run, and of course medium run in between. People are confusing when I make those statements. They are saying, look, there will be inflation, there will be stagflation, there's a cost, there will be. Yes, absolutely. But we have different time frames here, because the cost is in the short run. Assume we are going to have a very bad inflation and really a bad recession. But that's in the first years, first 6 months, etc. But if you look at the benefits to the United States over the long run, and the strategic benefits are massive. So that's for the United States. In the short run, right now, Putin will benefit greatly from it, because his prices are, in some cases, more than tripled. So the benefits are great. And Europe basically might even change its laws just to take oil and gas from Russia as a result of that. There will be benefits, side benefits to other countries. If you look at countries like Australia, all of them are far away, by the way, like Australia, Brazil, Guyana, Western Africa, all of those benefits from higher prices. But no one has any additional oil or LNG to sell at this stage. Most of those benefits basically are from the large increase in prices.
My final question, there's a pause. If the pause translates into something more, maybe like a ceasefire, will it lead to the normalization of oil supply and the cooling of prices, and also the calming of stock investor sentiment, sir?
Unfortunately, no. Here is why. The first one is ending the war today does not end the crisis today. Ending the crisis basically will take a long time, especially after Iran basically launched those destructive attacks on the energy infrastructure in the Gulf, especially on Qatar. So that's not going to end the crisis in any way. But on sentiment, we will see a decline in prices. The other issue is, if you look at the forward curve in oil, for example, you look at it in May and June, you see a decline from current prices basically to the 90s. Probably it will decline to the high 80s. But this is 50% increase from what we saw before the crisis. So we are seeing that massive increase in the forward curve anyway. regardless of that. And that is pure inflation. And the question is, okay, so what's going to happen? Rich countries can afford to subsidize their consumers. What about the poor countries?
Anas Al-Haji, always, as always, a pleasure speaking to you. Your perspective always bang on. Thank you very much for sharing these thoughts. And I hope that our viewers will come away more informed after this particular interview. Viewers, stay tuned, because in just 10 minutes, the Vote Vibe Vote Tracker will be on your screens. We're going to tell you who's getting how many votes in the 4 big battleground states of Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Assam, Bengal. The big numbers coming up, viewers, in just a few moments. Stay with us, don't go away. Objective. So fundamentally, this is an assessment. Of course, it's a 5-day period in which these individuals will try, and who they are, we don't know. Is it Trump that was actually talking to the leadership there? Who was the person engaged? Till now, we are being constantly told that Iran is in a desperate situation. But this doesn't seem to suggest that.
Key point is that he has put it out there that he has been having those conversations from the last 2 days, and he's saying this. And while he mentions the last 2 days, he's also going on to give those that ultimatum of 48 hours.
You know, the fact is, he says the United States of America and the country of Iran. So he's not saying that he's leading these conversations. At what level is this conversation taking place? Who's giving him assurances? We don't know. Remember that the Iranian regime is a complex regime. Yes. It's not exactly one at this moment where everyone is prosecuting the war from the same point of consensus. So it could be that these are the more realistic, maybe more pragmatic people within the Iranian establishment. The Israelis have, of course, been killing a large number or decapitating, metaphorically speaking, a number of Iranian top leaders. Many people have been saying that that is an attempt to try and get rid of all the pragmatists, so that then you're dealing with the hawks, and that is a war that is easier to sort of predict and prosecute. But fundamentally, this suggests that there are people within the Iranian regime that are wanting an end to this particular conflict, and therefore have engaged in, this is a very important word, productive conversations. What do these two words mean? What is the larger grasp that is going to sort of come out of it in the next few days? Remember, it's 5 days that we're talking about. And they've said that based on the tone, tenor of these in-depth, detailed and constructive conversations, very important. There are 4 or 5 adjectives here. Of course, there's also spelling mistake.
Spelling mistake, he's hurriedly written it.
But it is, and that's his style. Trump has always jumped in and always written very impetuously. So that is a problem. But nonetheless, tenor and tone of these in-depth, detailed and constructive conversations, this is what, and this is going to continue through the week. And he says that I have instructed the Department of War to postpone any and all military strikes. Now, this is a very interesting phrase, because immediately after, against Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure. So this is not a halt of the war. This is only a halt on those very sensitive, perhaps no-go areas that Iran has demarcated in the soil, saying that, look, you come after these, you can go after X and Y. But if you come after these, which is the power plants, the energy infrastructure, they'll be held to pay. And I think the Americans have realized that the Iranians have the capacity to punish those that threaten these important...
Absolutely, Rahul, because even as this comes out, the IDF, even the US Central Command, has been constantly putting out those satellite imagery, talking about how they are going after the Yards missile compound in Iran. They have not been able to do that much successfully. And we just broke that news. In UAE, 7 ballistic missiles were intercepted. So that onslaught from the Iranian side also continues. Do you think the Gulf region had something to do with possibly conversations with the United States of America? Or this could also be read as TACO, because there is a section which will also say Trump seems to be chickening out again.
I think, Riya, you've basically made a very, very important observation here. the people who have suffered the most are the Gulf nations. So you have the Strait of Hormuz that has been locked down. Remember, the Trump administration came out and virtually said we didn't expect. Trump came out and said that we didn't expect this response, when everybody who has ever gamed a scenario involving a conflict would tell you that one of the first responses that Iran would fall back upon was to choke the Strait of Hormuz.
Yes.
Who is most hurt by that? Apart from obviously the wider world, the most immediate pressure is being felt on the UAEs of the world. So all those 7 Gulf sister states, Kuwait, Oman, Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is actually moving its oil from one side of the coast to the other.
To the Red Sea, yeah.
So these states have been extremely upset. They've also had a meeting over the last 2 days. The International Energy Agency came out with a statement saying that, look, this is going to be a terrible crisis for the world if the Strait of Hormuz remains constricted, in fact, completely out of bounds. It's going to be a very long, very, very expensive proposition. The expenses are mounting because on a daily basis you have drone attacks from Iran. Business confidence is low. These economies were pivoting away from oil, trying to position themselves as financial global hubs. That is taking a beating. Expats are leaving. Flights are not coming in. So they have the most to lose. And they're beginning to wonder, this is not really a war that we invited. Yes. And we're being punished because we have a dependency, security dependency on America. We are under the American umbrella, and the Iranians are hitting us. So the Iranian tactic of targeting some of these countries is paying off dramatically, because clearly they are exercising leverage on Trump and saying, I think now we're going too far. We've got to find a solution. Could you use your good offices? You're the prime prosecutor of this war. Obviously, there's very little trust with Israel in the background, because Israel, as I said, has a different sort of idea of where they want this war to go. So, Griya, I think that point that you make fundamentally is very, very crucial to this. Because what we're seeing here are these Arab countries leaning on America to say, I think we need to let some sanity prevail.
Also, there were very less flattering words that came in from that meeting in Riyadh, which you mentioned about. The Qatar Prime Minister, in fact, went on record, Rahul, and he said that we all know who is benefiting out of this West Asia conflict, this Gulf war, and he directly, attacked the US for that matter. Do you think that seems to have also pushed Trump to put out the statement? And also one key point, no mention of Israel here.
No mention of Israel. That's what I'm trying to tell you. It's almost as if Trump has decided to subsume Netanyahu's mission. So Trump is making it very clear that I am the one who is going to decide the contours of any ceasefire, any cessation of hostilities, and we are going to, and remember he said 3 days back, in fact, I think it was on Saturday morning, where he said, I and Netanyahu are on the same page. When we end the war, Israel will end the war. If you remember that statement, we're going to try to pull out that statement. He used those words. Let's just go straight across. I think we have with us our friends who have been covering this entire exercise. Mr. Suri there with us, and also, of course, Arunima. Arunima, over to you first. Big news. I'm not saying that this is some sort of a massive cessation of hostilities. It's obviously very well defined, this tweet. It talks about only certain kind of infrastructure, energy and power. Other pursuits will continue perhaps to be targeted so that there's degradation. But how do you see this? Griya made a very important point, talking about the pain that some of the Gulf nations were suffering, and it's quite clear that some of them might have had a lot to say about this to Trump and Washington, D.C.
So to quote people who are living in UAE, it's the best news that they have heard since 28th of February. That's the first reaction that I got after touching base with those who are in Abu Dhabi, those who are in Dubai. The reactions are similar, of relief in other Gulf countries as well. Qatar has already declared, return to office. I think there must be some indication given, because these Gulf countries have been carrying on Backchannel negotiations with both Iran as well as United States of America, because they were suffering the most. And UAE, just if you take into account more than 1,700 plus UAVs, more than 350 cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, at least 15 of them, UAE had been singled out by Iran for its action, and UAE has now declared that its amusement parks, for example, the Yas Island amusement park in Abu Dhabi, that is also welcoming in visitors. So it is utilizing this comment, this post, social media post from Donald Trump to reassure visitors to come back and reaffirm their faith in UAE. Targeting of the desalination plant, which Iran was threatening to do if after the deadline ended, US continued to target its infrastructure, that would have been a real problem for Gulf, because they all depend on these desalination plants for their drinking water facilities. Also, one important point is that the weather condition in UAE has been adverse for the last 3 days. So already facing the drone attacks, the threat of missiles, plus adverse weather condition and the sense of uncertainty, life was tough for them. And this 5-day moratorium, like I said, best thing that they have heard in a long, long time.
Right, absolutely. Arunima, do stay on with us. Sanjay also with us. Sanjay, a big statement coming in from Washington. At the same time, when the 48-hour deadline was still at play, we do see how Trump has spoken about conversations that were happening with Iran for the last 2 days, and that's an important aspect that he's also talking about. So varied statements that are coming in from the United States, but they do mention about how very constructive conversations have led to the US, again, quote, granting this 5-day period that they will not go on to attack energy or in fact power plant infra in Iran. Big development that we are learning of.
Yes, and you're quite right to point out the timing of this, because it's only a day back that Trump issued that 48-hour ultimatum. Now we have it from him that the last 2 days they've been engaged in very productive talks. So what was what? With Trump, the last word from him is never the last word on anything. And of course, we have to consider that there is this 5-day period that we have. In any case, we are talking about a 5-day ceasefire. Certainly, by the sound of it, the Americans are on board, the Iranians on board. Israel would have no choice but to be on board. It's hardly likely that Israel will continue attacks in the face of what Trump has said. So we need to see whether this will be a ceasefire that lasts and it brings a settlement, because all the matters that are supposed to be settled have not been settled. Iran retains its ballistic missiles, it is launching them, it retains its enriched uranium. There is no commitment yet that it is going to surrender that option. So the aims that Israel had were really these two. And it is these two aims that the US joined Israel on. Iran retains that place, and if it ends here, certainly the end of a war will be welcomed, but Iran would have held on to what it stuck to in the beginning.
Was also pointing out our continuous coverage continues here on CNN News 18 as that big hint coming in from Donald Trump, the US president, and that has ensured that oil prices have plunged by 10% as well. This is after Donald Trump posted on his Truth Social account that talks are on with Iran. Those talks are positive and they're constructive, based on which he said that there will be no attacks on energy infrastructure, at least for the next 5 days. But would that actually last? That's something that many are asking, because what Donald Trump says and what his administration or what his military does are very often not the same things. In fact, the Iranian media has now come out and reacted as well. They've claimed that this is Donald Trump surrendering, backing down once again, because Iran has kept that sort of pressure over the last 3 weeks. So we're 4th week into this entire conflict. Donald Trump, Benjamin Netanyahu perhaps didn't expect this war to go on for as long as it did, but Iran has ensured that they are striking back and striking back hard, especially at US assets, at Israeli assets, and of course at allies of the US and Israel in the Gulf region. The Arab neighbors have felt the brunt of it for far too long in this particular war. Is that why we're seeing this toning down really from Donald Trump? Sanjay and Arunima continue to be with us. Arunima, as far as as the Gulf region is concerned, we saw how they've been bearing the brunt of this, and Iran had made it very clear that if they want this to stop, they need to choose sides. They need to choose sides with their Muslim brethren, so to say, and not with the United States and Israel. Is that pressure coming in from Europe, from the Gulf nations? Is that what explains this kind of stance that Donald Trump has taken?
Yes, I think the Gulf nations in their back channel, even though on the face of it, for example, the UAE foreign minister on his personal account said that we will never negotiate with terrorists. So that has been their public posturing. But, behind the scenes, back channel talks have been on because the Gulf countries, specifically UAE, has suffered the most ever since this war began. In fact, minutes before that social media post of Donald Trump, there were explosions that were heard in the city of Dubai as well as Ras Al Khaimah. Ras Al Khaimah is the westernmost port or the Emirate of UAE, closest to the Strait of Hormuz on the western side. So Ras Al Khaimah was, Iran had threatened that we will carry out attacks there because Iran felt that this territory was used to target its Kharg Islands. So UAE has been concerned, and there is no doubt about the fact that they had been looking for a way out. There has been a social media post from Oman as well. The Omanian government has reacted. This is a social media post from the Oman foreign minister who says that whatever you might think of Iran, the fact remains that this war was not of the making of Iran alone. In the past also, the Oman foreign minister had said that, US must back off and look for a way out. So that's the general mood in the Gulf. They have been wanting for a way out. And this 5-day ceasefire, if I can call it so, they will welcome it. They would want it to be extended.
Well, that really depends on Donald Trump and him walking the talk on his ceasefire, at least a temporary one at that, and what the negotiations between the two sides actually yield. But Sanjay, is this also possible that this could be because of the domestic pressure that Donald Trump faces? I mean, his MAGA base is also divided as far as his decision to go to war against Iran is concerned, and the fact that they have now sought more money, $200 billion from the Congress. Midterm elections are just about around the corner for him. Is there pressure for Donald Trump to back down from this war?
That has been the prime pressure on him. He's been looking for an exit line for some time now. This war is becoming more and more unpopular within the US, and not least because people have to fill in at the fuel stations. And Donald Trump clearly could not sustain this. Already before this war began, Donald Trump's popularity has been the lowest it's been for any US president for the past 70 years in relation to the present time in the context of the coming midterm elections. And this was going to threaten to be a complete wipeout for the Republicans if this level of popularity were to remain that low or even sink further. This has been the prime pressure on Trump. He's been looking for a way out. He never was very keen on this war to begin with. He had imagined, and he certainly said he believed, that the very presence and the very sight of the US buildup would force Iran to capitulate. It hasn't. 3 weeks of heavy bombing. Every day we have new numbers, how many targets hit, how many bombs dropped, and still the Iranians have held firm. They're continuing to fight. This is something Trump had never calculated on. His popularity has been plummeting, and he certainly doesn't want to go down and take the Republicans down with him coming up to the midterms, and that has been the prime push. And he has been very keen on a way out, and certainly, despite the public posturing, some level of engagement with Iran has been continuing, and that has led to this promise of a ceasefire. And 5 days on, we all certainly hope that it will last.
And speaking of those miscalculations, there's admission coming in from the US president that Iran closing up the Strait of Hormuz or leveraging that in this war was not something that they saw coming, which is unusual because there are reports, intelligence reports that have suggested that there was some amount of inkling that the Strait of Hormuz, which is the only geographical tool for Iran to leverage, would be used. And that chokehold, Arunima, is something that the world has felt. We've seen the price of crude go up. That's now plunged because of the statement coming in from Donald Trump. But that's not going to last, isn't it? Because even as we speak, even as we talk about this statement coming in from Donald Trump, attacks are still being reported in the region.
Yes, because Iran has made it very clear that it is not going to negotiate in any way. And even now, like you just reported, Iranian media, how are they reacting to Donald Trump's offer? They're saying Donald Trump has backed off yet again. So we're still waiting to know what the Iranian official position is going to be. The Gulf countries have been, especially Oman, they have been trying to impress upon Iran to take the offer. But the problem, analysts there in Gulf countries are also looking at this situation where you first killed, Al Khamenei. He was the supreme leader. Then you also eliminated Ali Larijani. He was the voice which was on the table for negotiations. Now, even though there is another supreme leader, there are concerns about his health, whether his physical health, his mental health, whether he's in a position to take calls. And, conversations with seafarers and those who are stuck in Strait of Hormuz gives us an indication that perhaps there is no central command in Iran at the moment which is taking decisions. It has come down to a level where local commanders are deciding at their own level, be it which ship to allow or be it what action to take. Their paramilitary force commander also has just been eliminated before the news of Trump's social media post came out. So how soon can Iran get a centralized response together? And how soon will we see a moratorium on all the firings that are happening, be it drone attacks, be it missiles? Because like I was telling you, just minutes before Donald Trump's post, Russell Khaimah as well as Dubai reported explosions. So it is definitely a situation which UAE calls hopeful, but they are looking at Iran's official reaction as well.
Absolutely, and we are awaiting that response from Iran, even though the Iranian media is coming out and claiming that this is just surrender and backing down from the US president. Do stay on with us. Tara Karta, former director of NSCS, is also joining us. Thank you so much for speaking with us. You're on CNN News 18. How do you read this comment that has come in, or de-escalation or a hint of that has come in from Donald Trump? Is this chickens coming home to roost finally for him?
I wouldn't be in much of a hurry to actually say that, because you never know within. But I think the fact that the polls have been steadily dropping, that's what we've been seeing over the last few days. His popularity ratings are going down. That is one. Number two is, of course, the price of gas has been going up in the US, which is extremely damaging. And number three is the fact that the Strait of Hormuz crisis, it's a crisis of, like your correspondent just said, even the sailors on board, what do? There are reports of people being without water, without anything. So this is something which I think a lot of countries have been saying, please stop this now, because we can't take this anymore. Europe is in crisis. India is not yet. So far so good. But this is, this didn't make sense from the beginning. But the trouble is, from the Iranian point of view, the fact that the last time they were in negotiations and the war started, they had agreed to everything with Oman, if you remember. They had agreed to stop nuclearization, complete inspections, everything, and then the next day the war started. So if I'm Iranian, I would have very low faith in this. But the fact, like what she said very correctly, is that who decides? Who is the person in Iran who's going to decide and say, okay, we are going to stop this? I don't know.
So when Donald Trump talks about these productive talks, who do you think he's speaking to? Many believe that Larijani was that individual who was believed to be somebody that the world could negotiate with. Now, with his elimination, who is left? Who is the one negotiating, and which way would that go?
I cannot. That's what we were, in fact, just trying to figure out as to who could he be talking to. There are no doubt there are opposition figures who have been, but they are nowhere likely to be able to affect the chain of command. The present, whoever's been opposing, they are not anywhere there. In a position to say, okay, this is now has to stop. So who does he talk to? So this, to my mind, is he said it's a temporary ceasefire. He's going to back off for a while. Now, whether that will then again, once the Hormuz clears and the ships are through, whether they will start it again, we don't know. But hopefully, my hope is that a number of very responsible countries, including India, have been weighing in to say, please end this war. You saw what happened today, the stock market crash in the country. This is hurting us very badly. So let's hope. We can only see what goes ahead. And one more fact, what we've heard is that there is a critical shortage of smart munitions. within the US itself. That could be another factor. They're simply not producing enough.
And their losses are pretty heavy. I mean, the kind of assets that they have lost in comparison to what Iran is losing, I mean, the financial cost is extremely heavy on the side of the United States.
Absolutely right. I mean, we've seen the costs, I think, which they had recently, I think BBC or someone had broadcast that. Also, though the GCC countries have stood up to be counted, so to speak, I mean, in that last statement which they gave, the joint statement, the fact remains that these are financial capitals of the world. They don't want to be involved in this. You know, so even though Trump, they did sanction, I think 6 billion in arms for the GCC countries. Seriously, does anybody expect GCC countries to stand up and fight? It's simply utopian. It can't be done.
And that's something that probably is weighing on the minds of world leaders. That's something that needs to be discussed, which is why we're seeing the kind of pressure that's being built as well. Sanjay and Arunima continue to be with us. Sarakarta, I request you to stay on with us as well. And we're talking about pressures coming in, Sanjay. The G7 foreign ministers as well put that kind of pressure. They came out and said, after initially being reluctant in joining this coalition that Donald Trump was building, eventually yesterday they did come out and say that we have to secure the Strait of Hormuz and we're ready to work on it. But the fact of the matter is that it is going to be difficult for the European countries, for NATO allies to be drawn into this war. And perhaps that's something that Donald Trump has been made cognizant of.
Well, certainly, it was America on its own, and it's not even the US on its own. It was Trump on his own, popularity dropping, oil prices rising, criticism building up, and also running short, as we've been discussing, of ammunition. Certainly the interceptor stock of Israel has come down clearly to alarmingly low levels, and also simply the price of these missiles. And we've had third systems use. One third system takes 2 years to make. It takes $2 billion to make. How fast can America keep producing these? It certainly was running out of military hardware options. It was running out of political goodwill within the US and within the whole region. In fact, between the US and Europe, between the US and just about everyone, the US and its Arab allies. And clearly, this kind of a crisis within the US led to some level of talks. And clearly, the people in Iran they would have been talking to would have been Pezeshkian and Arakchi. These are the first two names that come to mind, and also the parliament speaker Khalibaf, possibly. But Pezeshkian has taken a somewhat soft approach with the protesters before. He apologized to the protesters in the December-January protests. He said that the government is at fault. Clearly, he has been conciliatory. He has later made conciliatory remarks as well. He would be acceptable, or perhaps one of the least unacceptable persons in Iran for the US to speak with. Also, Arakchi has come across as a very reasonable sort of a person, though very firm in stating the Iranian position and very strong on that, but certainly someone that the US can speak with. The US has been speaking with Arakchi earlier. So it would appear that between the US negotiators on one hand and Pezeshkian and Arakchi on the other, some sort of certainly fragile and certainly temporary settlement has been worked out.
What that settlement is, we'll have to look at the nitty-gritties of that and for how long that settlement actually lasts, Sarakarta, because regime change is one of the objectives, is what United States and Israel has been maintaining since the start of this war. But who is it that they hope to install there? Someone that is amiable with these two countries, and also someone that the country of Iran wants?
No, the thing is, see, if it is Pezeshkian and Arakchi, then why did you go in for this in the first place? That is the point. I mean, you know.
In fact, just interrupting you there, Tara, I'll just come back to you. But what we're now learning is that there seems to be some reports coming in where some media reports are suggesting that Iranian media is now saying that there were no direct or indirect talks with Trump at all. So this seems to be another claim coming in only from Washington, something that Tehran is not ready to confirm just yet. These are reports that are suggesting that Iran has so far not held any talks. But we also on the other side have seen that Iranian media has gone on to say that this is just surrender coming in from Donald Trump. This is him backing down because Iran has been striking and striking hard, giving out ultimatums in response to the kind of threats that have come in from the US president. Arunima and Sanjay continue to be with us. Arunima, as far as these talks are concerned, there is no clarity because in this war, it's not just about warfare. We've also seen this is about narratives and optics. Donald Trump may say that he's decided to pause this entire war. Iran says no talks were held at all.
Two, three important points here. Iran, from the very start of this war, right at the start, it's lost its supreme leader, and then in the middle of it, it's lost Ali Larijani as well. But since then, Iran has been consistently saying that it is not going to engage any ceasefire talks with US or Israel. It has made it clear to Gulf countries as well, repeatedly invoking that we are all Muslim countries and we should all be together in this, and at the same time going ahead and attacking UAE and to some extent Riyadh as well. Now, two, three important news points that are coming in here. First and foremost, like you said, the Iranian media says that there was no direct or indirect talks with Trump. Iranian embassy in Kabul, they have said that after the Islamic Republic threatened to strike infrastructure in entire Gulf, that's the reason Trump has backed out, because the Gulf countries finally impressed upon Donald Trump, managed to convince him that this could mean disaster. So that is the official word coming in from Iranian representative in Kabul, that the real reason is not talks going well as Donald Trump claimed in a social media post, but because of that retaliation that Iran threatened and how the Gulf countries intervened. And the third important point that we are learning of, again courtesy local media reports there, Arab News is reporting that Russia and Iran's foreign minister are currently having a conversation. They're in talks after United States' later ceasefire offer.
Right, in fact, that's the latest piece of information that is coming in, that foreign ministers of Russia and Iran have held a conversation after Donald Trump's statement, trying to figure out what it is that was the context of this comment, because as far as Iran is concerned, they claim that no such direct or indirect talks have taken place. Russia there too getting a sense of what exactly has been happening, what it is that has truly transpired between the two sides. And as we see these comments coming in from both sides, Arunima, it's going to be interesting to see where this so-called ceasefire actually leads, because Donald Trump may say they're halting for 5 days, but if Iran says that there were no talks at all, then what's to say they are going to hold this end of bargain?
Yes, we'll have to wait and see how Iran officially reacts, because I can't underline this enough. Just moments before that, social media post by Donald Trump, Ras Al Khaimah and Dubai heard explosions, which mean Iran, even if they were talks, if Trump was going ahead and putting this up on social media, I'm presuming at least half an hour before that, if there were any talks going on, Iran would have known that Russia, US is going to declare this. Yet, just 10 minutes before that social media post, Dubai and Ras Al Khaimah gets attacked. So do you see that as Iran rejecting the olive branch from Trump altogether? Or is there any merit in Iranian media saying that, there was no conversation, Iran has never been speaking to Donald Trump or US, there is no negotiation happening? There is a lot of, grey area still. We only know the United States version of the story. The Iran version is equally important, because Iran, in the way it has responded to this war, has shown that it is beyond US and Israel's calculation. US and Israel, by their own admission, did not calculate this kind of attack on Gulf. They definitely did not calculate Diego Garcia or Indian Ocean being pulled into this conflict. So we'll have to wait and see the reaction, the official word coming in from the Iranian regime.
Absolutely. So this backing down, this de-escalation hint coming in from Donald Trump was just after he issued that 48-hour ultimatum. So what explains this backing down by Donald Trump? There are several reasons that could have led to this particular stance and this pause in war that Donald Trump really wants. One of them is that Saudi Arabia and the UAE wants to avoid this war. They have told Washington in as many terms that there needs to be some sort of ceasefire that comes into place. Iran has shown that it can hit back and it can hit back hard. It has its missile arsenal. There are drones that are flying across, especially in the Gulf region. And Iran has shown that their proxies too can act in a manner that was not anticipated. And the biggest one of them all is the chokehold that they have on the Strait of Hormuz. The oil LNG gas supply that has been held as leverage by Iran. That's something that seems to have forced Donald Trump's hand. In Washington, D.C., there are fears of a long drawn-out war as well. Is this going to be a forever war that Donald Trump plunges the United States into? That's something that perhaps was considered as well, which is why this decision to at least put this on a pause for 5 days has been taken by the U.S. president. Donald Trump has also not been able to afford a messy conflict. There are optics that he needs to pander to. Like I said earlier, his own MAGA base seems extremely divided as far as this war with Iran goes. Midterm elections, a midterm referendum on Donald Trump is just around the corner. And can he afford to continue this war that no one, many within his own base, did not ask for? That's something that perhaps was weighing on his mind as well. Any Gulf disruption then triggers price shocks that directly hits the US. Americans, the average Americans, will be feeling the heat. That's something that seems to be weighing on the mind of Donald Trump, which is why he wants a pause in this war. Whether that's something that has been negotiated with Iran or not, that jury is still out on that. A distracted United States also means that Russia and China gain ground again. Can the United States, can Donald Trump afford that scenario? That's something perhaps that he was advised over as well, which seems to be the reason why we have seen such a hint or such a decision of de-escalation that has come into the fore from the US president. Tara Karta continues to be with us, getting us more perspective on this as well. Tara Karta, we've discussed most of these reasons as to what could have forced Donald Trump's hand. But is it really that? Is it really the fact that it indeed is a case of Donald Trump having to force to kneel, so to say, because clearly Iran has outmaneuvered them in multiple arenas?
I'm not sure that's exactly right, because there is, after all, there has been substantial damage done on Iran as well. I would assume there is also an Israeli component to this, saying that the destruction, I mean, how many times can you bomb, these Natanz and these areas? They've already bombed it in June. They bombed it again. So there is a certain amount of total destruction of their missile and nuclear, so-called nuclear capabilities have been achieved. But you're right also, the disaffection, I think, within the Trump administration was apparent when Joe Kent resigned. There was the counterterrorism official who said there is no threat from Iran and no threat is imminent. So there is a problem there within the administration itself. And number three, however, the fact that what your correspondent said, that a strike